I'd like to welcome folks as we're getting started here. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We will get started with the presentation in just a moment, but we'll give folks a chance to get signed on. So thanks so much for being here and thanks for being prompt. This is, as we shared via email, being recorded. And we will share out the recording with all families, hopefully as early as tomorrow if we can get everything processed. Otherwise, it will be early next week. But you'll have an opportunity to see this. And certainly, if there's anyone that you speak with who was unable to join us this evening, please let them know that we will be sharing out the recording of this event. We'll give it just a minute or so for everyone to arrive. And once we have the numbers leveling out, we'll get started. It does look like we're leveling out, getting pretty stable here. So we will get going. So it's my pleasure to welcome you. My name is Dan Rubin. I'm the counseling director here at South, and tonight is a big night. But before we get into the substance of the evening, I'd like to turn it over to Tammy Strauss, who is going to do a welcome on behalf of the principal's office.
Thank you, Dan. Hi, everybody. Good evening. This is Tammy Strauss, principal of South. Just wanted to say welcome and thank you so much for being here. We know how important junior year is. And all of our very, very excellent counselors at South are here to help support you and assist you, to help you assist your child in navigating the post-secondary planning process. I am going to pass it over to Jason, the vice principal, to introduce himself as well. I hope you all get something meaningful out of this. And again, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Williams, the vice principal here at Newton South. You've most likely heard of me at least once or twice through the many emails that I send once a week about all the going on at South. And as Tammy said, we are really grateful for you to be here to take time out of your busy evenings and a very interesting, freezing, rainy, and not sure what's going on outside night. We hope you're going to learn a lot from this presentation. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Dan.
Great. Thank you, Jason. So it may be hard to believe that we're sitting here halfway through your students' junior year and starting to think about life beyond high school. I know every year we get some of the same sentiments from families who are saying, you know, I can't believe we're at this moment where all of these sort of big ideas that we've been thinking about since our child was yay big are beginning to come to fruition. And that can carry a lot of emotions with it. If this is your oldest child, you may be wondering how in the heck you arrived at this moment in time. If this is your youngest, you may be thinking about sort of what it represents. And certainly for some of you, your 11th grader might be your oldest and your youngest, and all of those feelings are kind of wrapped into one. Tonight, our goal is to present an overview of the post-secondary planning process, the ways that as school staff, as counselors, we will align with you and support you in this process of supporting your students. We'll also acknowledge that there's a lot of information, a lot of complex information, depending on who you've talked to or what kinds of sources you might have sought some consultation with. You may already be feeling a little confused or overwhelmed about what's ahead of you. If there's no other takeaway from this evening, we want to reassure you that we are your partners in this process. We're here with you. As Tammy shared, we have an extraordinarily seasoned and talented counseling staff who have been through this process many times and are here. We're here to consult. We're here to be kind of an expert sounding board, and we're always only a phone call away. I also want to acknowledge that here we are online. I know that we did get some feedback from families that it would have been really nice to be together in person for this event. The decision to remain online for this year's junior family night was actually because of feedback that we've also gotten that it is extraordinarily helpful for families to have this recorded and as a easy file to refer back to say, you know, I remember they talked about this at junior parent night, and this will be posted on the College and Career Center website in addition to the emailing the link home. But our purpose and our goal is to try to minimize your stress, to try to help you understand all of what lies ahead. You'll hear from all of the counselors this evening, and hopefully you'll come away feeling comforted and reassured that no matter where your child and your family is in this process right now, you will survive this process. Your children will survive this process. We'll all get through it together. So this slide right here, I just want to talk to you. At Newton South, the overwhelming majority of our students, reality is, apply directly to four-year colleges. And at times that can leave students and their families feeling as though that's the only option available to them. Tonight's presentation does sort of heavily cater to students who are planning on applying directly to higher education institutions, two-year colleges and four-year colleges. But there's a whole variety of opportunity available for all of your students. Sometimes that involves taking some time in a program like a gap year, whether that's something that's self-structured or part of a formal program with the intention of enrolling in a year's time or maybe a slightly longer duration in a four-year college or some other higher education opportunity. But we have many students who go directly into the workforce, sometimes by joining a trade union. We'll have some opportunities coming up, and Kathy Sabet may speak to this a little bit later, for alternative pathways and work opportunities that students might be looking for. We also have students who pursue vocational or technical training, not directly through the workforce or in the form of apprenticeship or union membership, but by getting some career education at a technical school. We have students who enlist in the military. We have students who attend college and join the military through a Reserve Officer Training Corps program, ROTC. And also we have some specialized postgraduate education and opportunities that some of our students partake in, some here in the district for students who have special education services that will extend beyond the completion of their time at Newton South. And also some students look to independent schools as postgraduate educational institutions. So all of those are options that are available. And we just want you to be aware that while tonight's focus again is skewed towards the college options, the four-year college and two-year college options, if you and your child are thinking about other options, please engage in that conversation with your school counselor, your child's school counselor. Let them know what you're thinking, and we are right there with you to navigate that process as well. Right now, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy Sabet, who is going to take us on to our next slide.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy Sabet. I am the College and Career Counselor here at Newton South. And just to give you kind of a detailed agenda for tonight, I just want to take a look at this slide. So the webinar tonight is going to really focus on, as Dan had mentioned, a four-year college admissions process. And so as you can see from the slide, you know, in addition to that, we will also be talking about additional, more focused monthly webinars and events that are going to be covered with in-depth admissions topics. So that'll be coming up. We'll also be going over and covering the components of the college application process. We're going to share resources that are available here at Newton South. I know where I work, Newton South, and outside of Newton South, both, regionally and also nationally, to help and assist preparing your child for the college application process. We'll go over the junior year timeline, and then we'll conclude by with a discussion of the roles and responsibilities of the student, the family, and their counselor. So we can go to the next slide, Dan. Okay, great. So I had mentioned that each month we'll be addressing a different admissions related topic more in depth. And so we call this our college planning series. This is accessible through the College and Career Center webpage, which you can find via the main high school webpage. Go to the counseling tab and then just look for College and Career Center. Here are some of the highlighted topics that we'll be covering each month. And so February, we'll be doing standardized testing. March, we'll be offering information about the college admissions process for students with disabilities. In April, we invite a cross section of colleges to talk about admissions trends and guidance for students and families. May, we'll do college personal statement essay preparation work, and then in June we'll have information about how to make the most out of your summer and assist with summer planning. And just a little note about how in the future we'll get to our new college and career planning platform called SCORE, but there will be WIN seminars available with counselors around familiarizing students with that. So.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ari Kenyon. I am a counselor in Cutler and Goodwin House, and I'm going to talk about where to begin. So I think our first instinct is to make the college list, but really before you even think about the college list and start to engage in any part of this college process, I think it's really important and valuable for students to pause and reflect on some big picture questions. First being, why do you want to go to college? Second being, what experiences do you want to get out of college in terms of academics and extracurriculars? What opportunities do you want available to you in terms of career exploration or research or study abroad? And I think most importantly, why are these experiences and opportunities important to you? Why do they matter to you? This process can be overwhelming because it can be open-ended and there's so many schools out there. So I think it's really helpful if you can ground this process by asking these questions. I think in asking these questions, it can ease some of the stress and uncertainty that's just inherent to this process. But I think even more importantly, it can really help students connect, what they're doing now to what they are looking for in college and want to achieve in college. And I think having that thread, that alignment between their here and now and their future can also make the process more relevant and meaningful for them. So in addition to asking and encouraging students to reflect on these questions, I encourage families to do that as well. I think that it's important for you to think about, what are your hopes and goals for your own student, and also consider, are there any constraints, whether that be geographic or financial, and to talk to your student about your hopes and goals for them and these constraints, because I think it's really important that everyone is operating on the same page. There are certainly a lot of moving pieces, and so I think it tends to go a lot more smoothly when, students and families are on the same page. And I think along those lines as well, I encourage families and students to have a conversation of how involved do you want me in this process? Some students really want their families super involved and they want them to be a consistent sounding board, while others want a little bit more independence. And there's really no right or wrong answer. It depends on your family dynamic, but I think again, that can help the process be a lot more smooth and ease some of the stresses if everyone knows their roles and responsibilities, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. So I think if you take away anything from this part of the webinar is that it's, valuable to take time to pause and reflect about these big picture questions and really the why, because at the end of the day, it's all about best fit for your student. And as much as students are working really hard to make themselves strong candidates for schools and they're marketing themselves in some way, I want students and families to also have some agency and feel empowered to evaluate colleges and really look at colleges and think like, is this going to be the best fit for my student in terms of academics, extracurriculars, career opportunities, et cetera. So please take the time to think about these questions and please share any reflections that come up from these conversations with your student's counselor. We really like to have these insights and information because it helps us in supporting and guiding you and your student through this process. And now I'm going to hand it over to Dave Kershaw.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to talk a little bit about, you can probably hit the next slide, Dan. Basically, essentially the application process. Ari just touched on some really wonderful points that are going to get you to the sort of starting point, but essentially there's a lot that's going to happen before the application process. So we're going to go over the nuts and bolts of that in great detail at many different intervals. So I'm just going to touch on highlight on some of those points tonight that will happen after you have done all the thinking that Ari was talking about, have built a list, have done some tours, things like that, and you're ready in the fall or mid next year, mid senior year to do to get involved in the application process. So what that will look like, the majority of what it will look like is the common application. The common application is the most common vehicle, probably the most likely vehicle that you'll be using and your students will be using to apply to school. It basically is just that. It's a common application. It was a way to streamline information instead of having every school have their own application. Obviously, it's a lot easier and more user-friendly to have an application that gathers all that data one time. There's over 800 schools now. It's grown exponentially over the years, and over 800 schools use the Common App as their platform. What it will gather is what you see here. They'll plug in personal information, education background, their testing results, activities, sort of resumes, things like that. And then, of course, self-reported courses and grades. Some schools will let students self-report grades and, of course, expect them to follow up with a final transcript at some point or official transcript, but will allow them to self-report. And that helps speed along the process a little bit in terms of turning around decisions. So the Common App process really in terms of a timeline can start as early as the summer, the summer of junior year going into senior year. They update the Common App essay prompts and the college-specific questions and essays. Those will all be available, as you can see, August 1st of this coming summer. So it's a good idea. Some people may not be ready then, and that's fine. It doesn't mean just because they're out August 1st, you need to start the process. But if you wanted to get a jump on things, they are available as of August. And it is something you can chip away at and save and continue and get back to. It's not something you have to sit down and hammer out all at once. So there are additional applications called the Coalition. Which is an application only through SCORE, which is our system that Dan sent out some correspondence on that we've just transitioned to from Naviance. And then there's a college system specific like UC applications or the Apply Texas application. There are also several schools that still use an internal system. So they won't use any aspects of the Common App, and they will have their own internal portals that they'll use as the vehicle for you to apply. They're very user-friendly. There's a lot of communication around how to do it, but you'll find out as you go through if those schools are on your list, what that process looks like. A big portion of the application process, as we've all known, and it's always been there, but it has evolved a little bit, is the personal statement and supplemental essays. The personal statement is, as you see, just a way for admissions to really gain, kind of insight into who you are, what drives you, what you're interested in. And it's, essentially a 650-word limit. There'll be multiple prompts, which again will be published in August to choose from which one of those sort of fits which Common App prompt fits you best, then that's a nice opportunity to be able to choose to do that instead of just having to stick to one cookie cutter prompt. There's several that sort of are tweaked a little bit that may speak to your interest or your style of writing, etc. Supplemental essays are also an aspect of the Common Application because it is common. And it is general information. Schools want to drill down a little bit and get additional information, and they do that through supplements. And the supplements or supplemental essays, and the supplements are very specific to the school. So after you've done your Common Application, you go into each individual school, and then most of them will have a supplement, and some of them will ask you to do one, possibly two, for each of those schools. So something to consider when you're setting aside time to do the applications, because it is another aspect of writing. They're not long, but there's just, you want to have a thoughtful response to those. And those are all focused on why you're applying to certain schools, why are you interested in a certain program, etc. You can then, as Kathy outlined here, they're very important. Obviously, for common sense would tell you why they're important. They're just, again, telling you a little even more specific information about what it is that's driving you to apply to the school. So Dan, you can advance if you could.
There we go. Sorry about that.
Perfect. Thank you. So then the next step is, once you've done the Common App piece, which is obviously a lot of personal information, is school-specific information. And that really is, as we all know, the transcript, right? So the transcript is essentially a really clean sheet of paper, just a one-page document that showcases your final grades from 9, 10, 11 in the first half of 12th grade. Essentially, when you're applying in early fall, it'll just be a bank of list of your senior courses. Above that will be your 9, 10, 11 grades. As you're applying in the fall, it'll just be a list of senior courses. As you don't have any grades yet, midway through the year will be those first half and mid-year grades. It designates what those courses are. So it'll be a list of, it'll be a name of the course. The next, in the first column, the next column will be the designation, whether it's an ACP, honors, AP, or AP course. And next to that will just be a credit listing for how many credits accumulated in that course. So it's really 3 simple columns. There is an unweighted GPA that we report for each year, which is included on the right-hand side. The left-hand side will house the grades and a list of grades, and on the right-hand side will be your unweighted GPA. It includes information about recent changes to grading as well. So changes that we've done, changes that we've made to our grading structure through COVID, through anything we've had to do specifically, we'll highlight that on the right-hand side of the transcript, just so people, they're looking at transcripts from thousands of different high schools. We just make it easy for them to understand what our language is in terms of grading. And it is very similar to most other high schools, just any specific aspects we'll point out there. Some changes in that regard in terms of GPA is that we no longer use a weighted GPA. We report an unweighted GPA, so there's no weight given for levels of courses, and it is on a 4.0 scale. Due to the changes in the grading scale over the past 4 years, we calculate those GPAs based on every year. So we used to have a cumulative GPA, and these, since we've changed the grading structure, we'll have a GPA from 9th, 10th, and 11th listed. And then as far as the next steps in terms of seminar, when we see your students next, as a seminar start this next week, we should have their unofficial transcripts ready so they can get an idea of what that looks like, what I just explained to you looks like, with their GPAs, including the grade 11 in progress grades. They should be uploaded by the middle of February. So we'll talk about them next week, show them an example, but then they'll be ready to go mid-February. In terms of GPA and calculations, we obviously doing our internal calculations based on a 4.0 scale, but as I just explained, they're seeing thousands of high school students and thousands of applications, and each school does it a little bit differently. So because of that, many schools several years ago adopted the practice of recalculating GPAs internally using their own system. It's roughly similar at most schools, but they have their own system, which will basically help them. It's usually a help to students essentially, and it'll factor in some things that we may not calculate on our end, et cetera. So just something to consider. I know in the past people have thought about, well, does freshman year not count at South and et cetera? Every year is really important, but the recalculation piece is also helpful to know that they will sort of take a last look at it before they're looking at applications. So that is kind of essentially the nuts and bolts of applying. There's a lot more to it, but we'll get into the details as we go further on in the process. So thank you. I'm going to hand it off to Hey Choi.
Hello. So I'm going to talk a little bit about standardized testing. The two standardized tests that colleges and universities use for admissions purposes is the SATs, or the Scholastic Assessment Test, and the ACT, which is the American College Test. The SAT is from the College Board and the ACT is from the ACT Corporation, and both are accepted by colleges almost interchangeably at this point. One is not preferred over the other. I think every school sort of like takes those two test scores interchangeably. There are test dates throughout the school year and also in the summer for each of the tests, and students have to register for those tests online through the websites. For SATs, it would be the College Board website, and for the ACTs, the actstudent.org. And students would generally register about a month before the test date, and there are multiple test dates throughout the year. There is a cost to the test. I think it's $60 for the SATs and $63 for the ACT without writing. And fee waivers are available for students who qualify. So if a student needs a fee waiver, they can come and check in with their guidance counselor or see Ms. Sabet in the College and Career Center, and we do have fee waivers available. Since the start of the pandemic, standardized testing has become more nuanced and complex. There are schools that are beginning to, again, require standardized testing at their school for admissions purposes. And then there are some schools that are test blind, where even when a student submits a test, they will not consider it for admissions purposes at all. And then there are schools that are test optional, where a student sort of gets to choose whether or not they submit test scores or not. And so, you know, if the student does submit the test, the school will use it for making admissions decisions. With all of these nuances, we would like to encourage students to take one of the standardized tests, and we would like them to take the same test twice. We're finding that many colleges super score, which means that they will take the highest reading score and the highest math scores from whatever test scores the student has available or submits. So having, you know, multiple sets of scores could be helpful in allowing the student to have that super score. Students can work with their college counselor, Ms. Sabet, or with us, the guidance counselors, to sort of look at their scores and determine whether or not the scores will be helpful in the admissions process for those test optional schools. And in case you have heard through the grapevine, there are changes coming in the future with the SATs. But you know, if you have heard, you know, SATs are going fully digital, but that is not for your class. It is for the sophomore class. For students whose first language is not English, many colleges may require an English language proficiency test, and the most widely used test is the TOEFL, the test of English as a foreign language. Students can register for the test on the ETS website, and the test is given at a test center, and there's also a cost to the TOEFL. We are finding that many schools are also accepting the Duolingo English test, which students can register for online at duolingo.com. And students can take this test at home under testing conditions with the right equipment. So it may be a good option for some students. We also want to make you aware of the ASVAB, which is the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. That is a test, a battery of tests that is used by the military and some vocational technical programs as placement tests. And lastly, we wanted to make you aware of the Fair Test website, where you can find updated lists of test optional and test flexible schools. Lastly, we want to advise you to go to the school's website for each of the schools that your child is interested in applying to get the most up-to-date information about that particular school's standardized testing policies. And now I'll pass it over to my colleague, Shira Limmer.
Yep, I was on mute, but I was doing a great job. I'm Shira Limmer. Thank you for being here. Starting in April, we're going to be asking the juniors to think about and start asking 2 of their junior teachers to write their letters of recommendation. We ask that they do this in person and have a conversation with them. Obviously, be polite about it. If your student is looking to major in a specific field, like in the STEM fields, they should likely speak with their science or math teachers. If they're going to art school, they should be asking an art teacher for that information. And if they're struggling with figuring out which teachers would be the best to ask, they can certainly come and meet with us and we can help them navigate that situation. We also ask that the juniors complete a student information sheet. And we invite all the parents and guardians to fill out an information sheet as well. We will all be writing letters of recommendations for our students. They don't need to ask us, that will be a given, but we do ask that the student and you fill out these forms for us so that we can be as comprehensive as possible in our letters of recommendation for the students. One other thing is when students ask their teachers to write their letters of recommendation, the teachers might ask students to complete an information sheet for them as well. And we do encourage them to do that. It is more fair and it makes sure that the teachers too have all the information that they need to write a fair and comprehensive letter for your students. And I will now I'll pass this along to Christina Brown.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Christina Brown. I am a counselor in the Goldrick House. Some of this is review. So talking about the resources that we have available, the College and Career Center website is an excellent place to start. Ms. Sabet is updating that with all kinds of different resources for college, career, jobs, internships. So that is a great place to kind of find it all. That will be linked on here when we send out the email, but also if you just go to the Newton South website, there is a link from there as well. If you go to counselors and find College and Career Center. Also, big plug for the College Planning Guide. This is a very long document, over 100 pages, which basically has everything we're going to talk about tonight and so much more. So if you are somebody who learns really well by reading, this is the place to go. And also if you have questions, it's really good to be able to just like go through, it's got the index and you can see, you know, have any questions answered about FAFSA or SAT, timeline, all of that. It's all in that guide. So definitely check that out. And then throughout this entire year, so starting as soon as tomorrow, of course, okay. And now the 1 minute I'm talking, my son is going to come into the room. Sorry. We are going to be meeting individually with students in the springtime, but also in the fall as well. So, so definitely we will be reaching out about that, but look out for that and feel free to set up meetings with us. We love to meet. We love to meet with students and parents as much as possible. So if we get to meet with every, student who's planning on going to college with their parent, that would be great. We can do that on Zoom or in person. And then other opportunities we talked about going to the college websites. There's a lot of information on there. And then NEFA, the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority, has good information. And then SCORE, which I'll pass it back to Kathy to talk about that.
Okay, I'm back. So let me just tell you a little bit about the College and Career Center. The College and Career Center is a very welcoming place. It's a space that is accessible and open to students in all grades, so 9 through 12. My office is located in the center, which is adjacent to the cafeteria. If you haven't if you're not familiar with that. But in the center, students will have access to a variety of resources that's going to allow them to explore kind of what their post-secondary options are. It's quiet and it's a very comfortable place. In there, I post lots of information, including jobs and internship listings, volunteering. There still is a little bit of printed information, publications there, which are quite good. Some nice books on different topics, ranging anywhere from scholarships to being the first in your family to go to college, so first generation, to writing essays, to books with lists of colleges. So those can still be quite helpful, I think, to students, or just doing some nice career research. We have the publication, the Occupational Outlook Handbook, which is a it's kind of like the encyclopedia of careers from the Department of the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. So that can be a really great resource for students to take a peek at. In addition to the resources, including myself being there, every fall we host colleges, and this was our first year after COVID of having colleges back in person, which was awesome. We had done 2 years of virtual visits. This year we hosted close to 150 colleges. And so they will actually set up shop in the center and will meet with students, answer questions, provide information about the colleges, and that can usually is a really nice way to connect with schools. We've also had representatives for gap year programs, vocational training programs, the trades. So, we try and make it a nice space for conferencing about, all different avenues and paths after for planning after high school. There's a diverse list of scholarships that I have posted in that's growing at the moment. So so that's always a really good thing for students to be mindful of. But I guess the best part of my job is getting to know your sons and daughters there. I will meet one-on-one with students, families, and their counselors, and just kind of talk about what are your individual hopes and goals. And if you're not sure yet, we can kind of explore those together. But helping kind of make sense out of the process of applying to college, if that's the route you're going, or if you're thinking you want to take time off, like should you apply to college first or should you wait until after you graduate? We can talk through all those scenarios, but I really do just enjoy the contact with the students there. Oftentimes students will come in and use the center just as a quiet space to do homework if they have a free block or cancel class. And I love that because we can have kind of authentic conversations. And so it is a really nice space for that. In addition to the College and Career Center, we've made a virtual space and a web page. And like I said, that's accessible through the main high school webpage. And there, as Christina had mentioned, there's a lot of information that changes daily. And you should take a look at that just in terms of what's available for juniors and planning ahead, summer, that type of thing, for college fairs. And then finally, I'll just mention real quick, is that on March 15th, we're going to be doing a career pathways fair. And that'll be from 6:30 to 8 in the Student Center. And this is where we're inviting, and it's a City of Newton event. So it's for Newton North and Newton South. And it will be a place where students can explore all the different options available to students after high school. So that could be employment. We'll have different employers there that might have leadership and, skill development, opportunities for students. There'll be educational institutions that are really focused on vocational or skill development. We're going to also have like apprentice type work. So there's going to be a variety of different ways that you can go. And we just want to expose students and families to what else might be available to students. And for some kids, like they might do one of those other options. I had students that took a gap year and then went and got their real estate license during that gap year, and then made plans to go to college after that. So those types of employers, industries will be at this fair on the 15th of March. So we hope you'll join us. Okay, without further ado, I think we should pop over to SCORE. So let's start with a nice graphic and video just to kind of introduce our new college and career platform to you.
Thank you, Kathy, for that. So just to show you a little bit more in terms of a deeper dive with SCORE. So on Tuesday, your students should have received an invitation email from SCORE to their Newton Gmail account, their NPS Gmail account. They will have in that invitation email this link, this image on your left-hand side of your screen, in prompting them to complete their SCORE registration. So much of their personal information is already there, as SCORE is synchronized with our student information system, Aspen. But these invitation emails do expire after 1 week. So we encourage your student to get their registration completed and logged in at some point this week. If they get to Tuesday of next week, they haven't done that, we can always resend the invitation email, but they just should be aware that they may encounter an error message if they try to complete their registration after Tuesday. We will be, in all likelihood, on Tuesday, for those students who have yet to complete their registration, resending that link just to keep the link fresh for them. We are encouraging them, once they log on to SCORE for the first time, to add an alternate email address. So they have the capability, when they look at their profile, of adding a personal email address. We are considering that to be their best practice, so that they can more easily send and receive messages if there are colleges that they're exploring. And there are some restrictions in terms of student email addresses, Gmails, through our email server, that they are only allowed to send and receive messages internally to our system, and for specific email domains that are on our allowed list. So by adding their personal email address, it will just guarantee that they have complete access to reaching out to any colleges, universities that might reach out to them, expressing some interest based on their information through their SCORE profile. We also are encouraging students to add their parent or guardian email and contact information And when they do that, that will send you an invitation to be on a parent or guardian account linked to your student's SCORE account. Parents and guardians will have access to much of the same information as your students through SCORE. The biggest difference is that through the parent or guardian account, you can suggest colleges to your children, but you cannot change them, move them from the suggested category to the colleges I plan to apply category. So we encourage this to be a collaborative process between students and their families, but we just want you to be aware that you will, with your students adding you, have the opportunity to have a parent or guardian account. So Kathy's just going to talk a little bit about a couple of getting started points in SCORE.
Hi there. So yeah, we just wanted to kind of give you just a couple of slides just to show you like briefly what it looks like inside. So when your student goes in to do a college search, they will they'll have this dashboard and they'll be able to just click on Discover to get started. Dan, can you switch to the next slide? So when a student clicks Discover, it's going to open up, as you can see on the left-hand side, there's just a quick screenshot there of some of the areas or criteria where students can, begin filtering their list down from the, 4,000 colleges that are in the United States. So criteria such as location, the size of the school, by major, athletics or clubs. And once they enter that, then on the right-hand side, it'll just keep sorting as the criteria is added into an alphabetical list. So that's just sort of what it looks like. Very appealing, I think. And then another option, you do the Discover tab, or when you first go on immediately when you log in, it asks you if you want to take a quick 2-minute quiz to kind of see what your preferences are for colleges. So there's a couple different routes you can go to kind of get this information, but we just wanted you here to kind of see like what it looks like for the outcomes when you do that 2-minute quiz. So there's the list that you'll have available to you, or when you do the quiz, it also comes out with like just these little like Instagram type or Pinterest or something, very kind of modern looking, previews of a college that fits the criteria. And then you can just click within those, squares. And then in addition to the colleges that match your criteria specifically, you can also, SCORE also does a nice job at kind of suggestive selling. So like if you like these schools that are your matches, maybe you'll like these other schools. So in the phase of kind of like where, most juniors are, the second semester of junior year, where you're exploring, like doing these searches, exploring your colleges, putting a list together, it's okay if the list is kind of, is bigger and then, kind of shifts and changes and evolves. So the suggestion piece here is a nice feature, I think, and it's easy to access. So yeah, so we just kind of wanted to share just a brief little look at those for you. And now I'm going to turn it over to Donna Siegel, who'll be talking about the team.
I gotta unmute myself. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Thanks for coming. I'm going to be talking about roles and responsibilities. And we look at this as a team of, the student, the family, the counselor, and, we can go through the next slide. We can get to the next slide. The counselor role really is just to support the students in every aspect of this process from beginning to end and everything in between. We help to navigate the whole process, and that could be organizationally, providing emotional support, developing a balanced list of schools, making sure kids are on a timeline, also, encouraging them and reminding them about all the tools and resources that they can use, such as SCORE, which we're now getting familiarized with, and using the Career Center, which is Kathy's space where she supervises and monitors and welcomes a lot of colleges who visit. We're responsible for helping kids with application completion, happy to help kids with every aspect of it. Counselors are happy to also review essays and also assist with questions around financial aid and scholarships. Kathy's also an incredible support. So when we say team and we say counselors, plural, yes, every student has a counselor, but they also actually have another counselor, and that's Kathy. Kathy's our career college counselor, and she's really an expert. So kids will meet with her, kids will meet with us, and families can meet together with all of us. So basically, our goal is just to support kids in navigating this entire process, because there are a lot of balls that can be dropped and there are a lot of balls to juggle. So we want to just help them and support them through this process. The student role is to really be active and to lead the process and set the pace. We want to see kids taking initiative to meet with their counselors and Ms. Sabet. And we, encourage students to communicate, self-advocate, seek assistance from their counselor and Ms. Sabet. We also try to encourage kids all year long during junior year and senior, the beginning of senior year, to continue to do their best academic work and to engage in the research that I just mentioned, using tools like SCORE, attending college fairs, college tours, maybe attending some rep visits that come to Newton South. We have lots of reps that come, and meeting with Ms. Sabet. And lastly, we want kids to complete the student information sheet. It's very important, and that sort of happens more at the end of the year, junior year, where counselors do it at their own pace and whenever they choose to. But we tend to ask kids to start thinking about filling out that student information sheet. Some kids want to take it over the summer and fill it out. Some kids prefer to wait until September, which is totally fine. And lastly, the student's role is to make sure that they send testing to colleges. If colleges require testing, if they're taking testing, whether it's ACT or SAT. And there's one thing that's not on the slide that I wanted to mention, which I know will be talked about a little bit later. We also encourage kids, and a part of our process is for students to get 2 letters of academic recommendation. And so that's also part of their responsibility. And someone else is going to speak about that later. In terms of the parent caregiver role, we feel that the parent caregiver role is to also support students. Parents support students in many different ways. Students require different levels of support. Your student, your child, and you'll figure that out as you walk through this journey and through this process together. It might be organizational support, might be reviewing essays, it might be attending visits with them, accompanying them, might be, obviously financially, you'll be supporting them. It might just be emotional. So I think it was Ari Kenyon who said earlier, like have a conversation in the beginning, make sure everybody's sort of on the same page and everybody knows what to expect from each other. So the kids know what to expect from you and you know what to expect from them, even though expect the unexpected. That's really helpful. Other things that, these are just guidelines and things we've learned over the years that parents, role and responsibilities to offer perspective, thoughts, and support without judgment. And just remember, it's not your process, it's the kids' process. So making sure they're really owning it and you're supporting them. Communicate any limits to your child, for example, like cost and distance, like having a really frank conversation with kids in the beginning of this process is super important. Your student, distance-wise, if they're a student who's ever been away from home, if they typically go away in the summer and that's a comfort level for them. Maybe you can think about going beyond the Midwest or to the West Coast, but if not, you don't think this is the right time, for them to launch and go across country. These are the kind of things that, we are happy to field questions, talk with you, hear from you so that we can talk with the kids. Another role of the parent caregiver is, like I mentioned, you can help them just stay organized if that's the level of support that they need. Because again, there are a lot of balls to juggle and a lot of deadlines, and staying on top of applications is super important. Please communicate with your child's counselor, reach out to us, happy to talk with you. And like I said, attending college visits, now a lot of colleges, happy to have you on campus, but there's also a lot of virtual tours that are still really great that you can do. And I think that's really important because you don't have to visit every college. So, and helping students completing financial aid applications is very important. And eventually, and usually it comes in sometime in the fall of the student's senior year, there's a parent caregiver information sheet that is like a 7-question sheet. And it's so helpful to us to hear your perspective, your thoughts about your child's journey through the years. And hearing, it's often, an opportunity for parents to reflect on their growth. And so we really like to get those sheets from you. We learn about your kids and we find ways to complement, our statements and embed information in our statements that you share with us. So that's really helpful. And basically, I think that's the overview of the roles and responsibilities. I think I'm handing it off to Aaron Lewis, right?
Yes, thank you. This is, we're going to talk about a little bit about a timeline that counselors are going to help students through the next few months. The beginning of a timeline, obviously, is right now. We're going to be doing a seminar with students in the next week or so. All counselors are going to be meeting with their students during win time. The conversation going to be very similar to tonight's conversation. We're going to be covering much of the same topics, albeit it'll be a little bit more condensed than tonight. So we'll be reinforcing the messages that we're giving tonight. We encourage, as we've said a number of times tonight, that kids meet with us individually. Usually kids meet with us many times between now and when they're done with the process. We'll be meeting with kids probably starting next month with their registration, with their choices for next year. Kind of putting together there's more of a choice next year in terms of what kids are interested in and across all departments. So that's nice for seniors to be able to branch out a little bit. We talk about a balanced course load. That's important. Review with them the self-assessment. What are they, what factors are they going to kind of look into in terms of what their post-secondary planning is? We'll discuss their summer plans as we normally do after each year. And then we'll be talking more about SCORE. So the independent student work, we're talking about SCORE, registering for ACT and SAT, researching challenges and interesting summer courses, and maintaining focus on coursework throughout. I've talked to some seniors today that are starting to feel a little bit stressed out, but kids kind of try to stay focused for the rest of the year. And the next slide is going on to Sarah Style.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm going to just continue the timeline and talk a little bit about March and April of this year for your junior. More independent student work. There's just a ton, we saw a little peek at SCORE. There's a ton of great college research that students can do now. And now's a great time to meet with us and start to explore that when there's no, deadline looming. They can just start to kind of reflect, like Ari Kennan said in the beginning, about what they might want, what kind of opportunities and experiences they might want out of a college experience. So they can do that research and start to build a list. And again, I think Kathy Sabet mentioned the list in the beginning might be kind of long and meandering, and that's completely fine because that college list building process will evolve over many months. I still am talking to some seniors who are adding and deleting a couple of lists of schools from their list here and there. And some of that list building editing, especially will happen based on students' deadlines. Some students will be applying in November, occasionally, or mid-October, but November are some most common deadlines for early applications. And then other students will apply with more regular decision deadlines, January, February. And so their lists will understandably maybe be evolving a little bit more in the fall. So in addition to meeting with us and talking about college list building, definitely looking into using their summer months in really productive and positive ways, whether that's summer programs or working part-time volunteer work. There's so many possibilities, for students, as in the summer. So we're always happy to meet with students and talk about that. Working on a resume, registering for standardized testing. And then in addition to independent research for college list building, students can visit schools in person, do the virtual tours that were mentioned already, and potentially plan a college visit over April break, or if it's just hard to get on campus, again, take advantage of meetings with Ms. Sabet and counselors in school and find out how to get links to those virtual tours that are really informative and useful. And then, ongoingly, we'll be meeting with students. A lot of us have online scheduling systems, so students can sign up online or message us or email us for availability, or just come by and figure out some times to check in and work on some of these things together. I think that pretty much covers it, and I'll be kicking it to my Goodwin House colleague, Kara Veely.
Hi, everyone. How are you? Can you hear me? Yes. We're talking about checklists and deadlines. So something to keep track of is when to register for the SAT or ACT. You have to register ahead of time. At a certain point, they cut it off, and even before then, it may become full. So going directly to the website for the test that your child is choosing to take and making sure they're hitting the deadline for registration is very important. I think it's nice for kids to take the SAT, which we offer at South. There actually is some research out there that when you're comfortable with your environment, it can give you a little edge. So that's something to keep in mind. Another student checklist item, asking 2 academic teachers for college letters of recommendation. So for most kids, those are, if they're applying early, that will be 2 Big 5 junior teachers. So, English, history, math, science, world language. 2 teachers from junior year, because there's not enough time to get to know the senior year teachers if you're applying on November 1st. But if they are applying regular decisions senior year, 1 or 2 senior teachers could be fine. That's the case for most kids. For the only time that, we get the question a lot, should we do the teacher from the major that my student's interested in, or the teacher that knows them better? I think usually the answer is the teacher that knows them better. The only exception is if they're going to a very, very specific school, they're going to a school that's all technical or engineering, then probably they want a math or a science. Or if they're going to art school, it'd be good to have an art teacher. So they should continue seeking and applying summer job programs, internships, volunteer work. Jobs count. Sometimes people think, oh, I'm just working. This counts. This is real life experience. And it's not a one size fit all that this is what colleges want. What they want is for kids to, be productive and get new experiences and gain life skills. So they'll be looking like, how are they using their time? Did they do something interesting, productive, different, eye-opening during the summer? And again, it doesn't have to be something super fancy. A job, at the local supermarket teaches a lot of skills. Parent caregiver checklist. Make sure you review the SAT and ACT registration deadlines with the student. Check in with them about summer plans, figuring out something that would be a good match for your child. Because I think it's always nice to be able to tell a story about a kid that really they hear some interests, and they're what they're choosing to do matches those interests. It helps colleges understand your child better, and also makes your child understand your child enjoy their experience more. So schedule a family meeting to review preliminary college lists. Again, communicate really clearly about any limits, cost, distance, and complete the parent caregiver information sheet, which we just love to have and we take very seriously when we write our letters. And Dan, who's next?
We are going to, I think it's Chris.
Yes, that's me, Chris Hardiman, Goldrick House. Welcome, everyone. I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the upcoming dates and events. Aaron Lewis did touch upon this, the course registration. I will just reiterate that those meetings are really important that counselors have with all juniors, one-on-one meetings. It will be usually during a week-long period, sometimes spreading into another week. In March, we will let your students know exactly when we'll be having those meetings to talk about courses for senior year and making sure that they are taking a balanced load. Because after all, they are not only taking courses senior year, but they're applying to college, whether they're doing that early for November deadlines or possibly for January deadlines. It is like adding on a course when you're applying to college, because it's a lot of work. Even if you get started in the summer, there's still stuff to do for that in the fall. SAT and ACT testing, that was already touched upon, but just so you know, there is information on that in the resources section on the College and Career website. I will echo what others have said. The website has so much information. Kathy just really spends a lot of time to keep it updated and current. College fairs are a really great way to get to students exposed to colleges, and also just to continue showing your interest by going to the fairs and signing your name. There are still some virtual fairs rather. There's one in February, there's one in March, and then there's one in April. So if you can't go to a fair in person, or you're not comfortable with that, you can go to that link for the NACAC college fairs and you can find information. You can also find information on in-person fairs in other nearby cities, for example, Providence, Rhode Island, if you can't make the Boston one. The Boston National College Fair is in person this year, and it is May 2nd and 3rd. And you can also find a lot of information on how to register for that at the website, again, the NACAC attend.org. And then finally, for the spring, there will be college visits. College reps come, a lot of them come in the fall, but there are definitely some that come in the spring as well. And Kathy will be posting those on the College and Career website. But now that we have SCORE, they will be posted in that place as well. There's plenty of notice that she gives to students to make sure that they are aware of when these college representative visits are. Because again, it's another good way for students to find out about a college from a direct rep that oftentimes reads the student applications. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Jim Medeiros.
Thanks, Chris. I hope everyone is doing well here this evening. It's been a long evening with lots of information, and just want to reiterate that that all of us are here to support you and your student through this entire process. So if you have any questions, if there are any confusion, please reach out to us. We are definitely in your corner. We're on your team, and we look forward to helping you. We have a wonderful resource in the College and Career Center through Kathy Sabet. So please reach out to us if you have any questions, because we understand that this can be an overwhelming process for you as well as your student. Just a few takeaways from tonight. As Mr. Hardiman and Mr. Lewis mentioned earlier, senior course registration is an important process, and we all look forward to meeting one-on-one with our seniors, our rising seniors, to discuss their courses, to reconnect with them, and to discuss their plans for the future, as well as sort of the immediate process in the spring, to kind of gauge where they're at and to guide them through the process. So that senior course registration is not just about choosing courses and making smart choices, but it's also a chance for us to connect with them and support them in this process that will be very much a part of your lives over the next 6 months. Second big takeaway is the research. Research is so super important, and this is a great time to initiate that research process. We urge you to use the resources that we have, especially with SCORE. That is new to us, so we will be learning to use it along with you and your students. So we will be learning together as we start using that important college and career platform. But research is very important, and this is a great time to start. And then start kind of that list development. And so really we urge students to think about the goal is to like all of the colleges on the final list. And right now it's just about casting a wide net, looking at so many different options, and then over the next 6 months, sort of narrowing down those options to a final list of maybe 8 to 12 colleges in the fall. That's sort of the average. And so it's just really kind of telescoping those choices from a broad range down to a narrower range over the next several months. Interviews are important and encouraged, especially for schools that are top on the list. If they're a top choice, and not all colleges do interviews, but if they do afford you the opportunity, it really is a good process for students to look into the interview process with the college admissions. If you or they have any questions about that, please consult with us, and we're happy to provide that guidance. Another important takeaway is just college affordability. I mean, there's a wide range of options. And so it's just important to consider that as part of, the list development, and looking at colleges and looking at their affordability. And then the last takeaway, I think, is just the special considerations that when you're looking at colleges, looking at the supports for students with disabilities. If a student is interested in pursuing fine arts, visual arts, performing arts, just looking at those requirements. And some of our students go through the recruitment process. So it's important to sort of, if that is a part of their individual life, then we want to make sure that you're getting the information that supports you in that process. And I will add that it's important to check out the requirements for all colleges. It's the best place to do it is on the college website. It's important for students to make sure they know what the deadlines are and know what the requirements are for application to those colleges. So again, it's a lot of information, but if you have any questions, please reach out to your students counselor. We are happy to help and to guide you through the process. And I know as we're closing down, I want to hand it back to our department chair, Dan Rubin.
Great, thank you, Jim. So, there's some big thoughts that oftentimes, I'll lead with at the beginning of the program, but just something I want to leave you with tonight is this moment in time, this planning for life beyond high school. For many of your children, this might be the first big life decision that they are engaging in with some, real meaningful degree of self-determination. And that can be scary. That can be scary for them. That can be scary for you. At the conclusion of elementary school, there wasn't really a debate. Maybe you considered private school, maybe your child went to private school, but it was clear they were moving on to the next grade. They were going to middle school. Likewise, at the conclusion of middle school, your students transition to high school. Now there's more ifs involved. If they choose to go directly onto higher education, if they choose and whatever pathway they might be choosing for themselves. As parents, it's natural to have our own feelings about the choices our children are making. There's a tremendous opportunity here to provide coaching, to provide feedback, to help your students to learn more about themselves, and for you to learn more about the young adults that they're becoming, and to really give them the space to talk about, what are the things that they're excited about, what are the things that they're feeling some apprehension or nerves or fear about, and really sharing some of your life experience and helping them get through this period of time. There is going to be a prolonged period of uncertainty where there are some choices that get made on the student end about what opportunities to explore. And then next fall, we'll spend some time talking about, so what does it look like when students are actually trying to execute some of those decisions, submitting applications. And then, of course, there's a period of waiting before students learn what choices do they have at the end of this process? What colleges do they receive offers of admission if they're choosing to pursue college? What pathways might they want to explore further if they're looking at other options besides college, before ultimately making that final decision? I will just say that for students and families that go through this, it is often a period of mutual discovery. It's an invitation for your child to sort of, metaphorically speaking, maybe move from the back seat to the passenger seat, and then ultimately into the driver's seat. And you slide over to the passenger seat. I'm sure many of you have been over this last year or so, perhaps sitting in that passenger seat, teaching your children to drive. It's really in many ways maybe an apt comparison. But we are here with you. We are here to support you and your students. I know there may be some questions that have been answered in the chat throughout the night, but there are some additional questions that we're happy to try to answer in real time here. I'm not sure how well you're able to make it out, but on this final slide, there's a quote here that says, "The future will arrive when it's time for it to arrive, and you do not have to exhaust yourself trying to figure out how you will get there." I think that's sage advice, for you and for your students. This process will unfold. We are right there with you, helping to support you. If you have questions, if you're feeling stressed out at any point in time, pick up the phone and call your child's counselor. We are here to assist. Send an email, whatever the case may be. But know that we are committed to navigating this process, getting through this process right alongside with you. And we're excited for all that's in store as your children go through this final stretch of their Newton South experience. So that is all for our presentation. And as I said, we are more than happy to answer some of the additional questions that you have, and I'm actually going to exit our presentation mode here and give us an opportunity to really see one another in a little bit more of a participatory way. If I can figure out how to get my control screen back up, and now I can stop sharing, and there we go. So we're going to switch over to a gallery view. And let's take a look at what we've got in our Q&A. That is still, no unanswered questions. Imagine that. We are more than happy if there are any additional questions to field some more questions. We're at 7:51. We're happy to have a little bit more time. I'm seeing a message. And my apologies for having too many windows open on my screen here. But there, as I understand it, are some participants with hands raised. So let's do this. I'm going to go first to first name I see is Aura Nakash. And I'm actually going to be able to, I think, allow you to access your microphone. You should be able to ask this question live for us. It looks like we might be muted here. But if you want to unmute your microphone, we're happy to answer your question. No, sorry, I'm seeing another person with their hand up. This looks like it's Lin Guo. Lin, would you like to ask a question? You can unmute your microphone and we're happy to field the question. I'm sorry, Lynn, I'm not, you're able to unmute. Let me see if I can, there we go. I'm sorry if we're having technical difficulties. I'm seeing on here, it looks like there's an opportunity to ask to unmute, but I'm not able to actually unmute you myself.
I'm all set, actually.
Perfect. Oh, okay. Thank you. Are there any other attendee questions? I'm seeing there were a few that came in through the Q&A here in the last little bit here. I see one that asks, and it looks like Ms. Choi is actually in the process of typing an answer, but in the Q&A, you might have seen the question or some comments about scattergrams. And the question is, what is a scattergram? A scattergram is a visual representation of some of our admissions data for Newton South students in recent years. And it's a scatter plot with one axis representing grade point average and another representing standardized test scores. And it allows us to have a better sense with some predictive ability of what a student's chances of getting in at a particular college or university might look like in comparison to other Newton South students who have applied. Another question here, on average, how many colleges should a student apply to? Also, are college tours important to getting accepted into colleges? Does one of the counselors, does anyone want to jump in with regard to just as you talk to students, how many colleges you typically recommend a student have on their list?
I can talk to it. So there's not a one size fits all, but 8 to 12 is probably a typical amount of colleges. Sometimes people might say, I want UMass, for financial reasons or geographic reasons, and it's definitely in my range, and they might have, just a safety to go with that. But, typically the average kid at Newton South usually has 8 to 12. When you get higher than that, kids start to make mistakes. It becomes too much to handle typically. The casting the wide net sort of way of doing things doesn't always work out as well as people hope, which ties in to the next question in terms of, I'm sorry, it's a long night. But it's just, you don't want it's yield. So basically, if you apply to schools, you want to have the capacity to show them that you're interested in them. So schools are judged by of the number of kids that they accept, how many of those kids accept them. So they are trying very hard to figure out if your kid is just slap them on the list because they were on the Common App, or if they are actually interested in that school. So the reason a tour might be important, or attending the college info session at Newton South might be important, or going to a college fair might be important, or going to the website and checking things out might be important, is that colleges use those as factors to predict your interest and the likelihood that if they accept your child, they will accept the college, making their yield higher. So, it's not that usually interviews are with alums, it's not that they're on the admissions committee or have some big say in the process. It's just one more factor to prove to the school, I didn't just throw you on my list. I actually am very interested in you.
Great. Thank you, Kara.
Dan, can I add to that real quick?
Please.
Yeah. Also, I had some conversations with seniors this fall that made me realize just how much they talk to each other about the schools on their list and the number of schools in particular. And so earlier in the presentation, we talked about ideally students will like all of the colleges on their list. And so I had a candid conversation with a senior this fall because she was just putting schools on her list that she liked, but I think it was more for the number because her peers, some of her close friends were applying to 10 and she had 5, but she loved those 5 and she had a balance of, target and likelies and reaches. And she ended up getting into the school that she really wanted to go to. So she realized she didn't need to just add schools to reach the 8 number or the 10 number that some of her friends were doing because her process just looked different than her friends. So that's just something to keep in mind too, is I have had students who have 5 schools and they like all 5 and it's a good balance. And they don't need to add more just to kind of match what maybe their good friends or classmates are doing.
Absolutely. Great advice there, Sarah. Thank you. I'm seeing a question. Are the personal statements from the common application, the 650-word personal essays, always the same from year to year? There are some modest changes sometimes year over year. They are largely the same. And if you were to take a sneak peek at those prompts, they are sufficiently broad that students can apply many topics to those essay prompts. So, oftentimes we'll, consult with students about kind of how to fit a story that's really important to tell, is central to who they are and their identity, to fit one of those prompts. But they largely stay the same from year to year with occasional tweaks. Certainly during the time of COVID, there were some additional essay prompts that were included, and sometimes they retire a certain prompt, but they try to keep them pretty similar from year to year. I'm seeing another question here. I'm not sure how to figure out what costs and tuition or like room and board are to attend each college. Are counselors able to help with financial info? So on that front, what I would tell you is every college is actually legally obligated by Department of Education policy to put what's called a net cost calculator on their website in a prominently featured way. This will help you by using an estimate of your personal financial information and the college's cost of attendance, come to somewhat of an educated guess as to what a financial aid award from that school might look like. I will not profess that we are all the financial aid experts that MEFA is. That was an organization we talked about earlier as one of the resources. MEFA, it's the Massachusetts Education Financing Authority. They are unique in that they are a publicly funded agency that the state of Massachusetts has created and sustains to assist families with the college financial aid process. We will have many families that lean on MIFA. As counselors, we are happy to help with the process as much as we can, but I will speak for myself, but I think for all of us that there are sort of limits to our expertise. And if you have really in-depth financial aid questions, I would strongly recommend that you take a look at the MIFA website. They have a helpline, phone hotline, they have online chat support, and they're just a tremendous resource for assisting with that financial aid process. And I'm seeing one last question that's unanswered on here, and I'm also looking at the time, and we'll do our best to answer this one, and then we'll wrap up and say goodnight. But the question is, how have test optional policies affected admissions? That's a tricky one to answer because I think it's multiple. The low-hanging fruit answer, I will tell you, is that we are seeing a lot more students applying to a lot more colleges because there are schools that maybe students who their transcript is much stronger than their test scores might have self-selected out of applying to some selective colleges. And in a test optional world, students are saying, why not? I've got a really strong transcript, and in the absence of test scores, I might be a really strong applicant at this school. So we're seeing more students applying to more schools. That's not just a Newton South thing, that's an across the board thing. So that's a blessing and a curse, right? It might open up access for many students to schools that they wouldn't have previously considered. It also expands the applicant pool and can serve to make schools more selective. So that's a little bit tricky, a double-edged sword there. The other piece that I would just note with that is that, in addition to the selectivity piece, colleges have an incentive with their test optional practices too, because what they end up seeing is that year over year, the students who choose to submit scores will oftentimes be students who skew towards the higher end of that college's published score range, which from just a statistical mathematical perspective means that those scores will continue to go up and up if the only students who are scoring above the averages or on the high end of the averages are submitting. So for colleges who are playing sort of the rankings game, oftentimes there's an incentive for them to be test optional, but those are just a couple of pieces. I don't know if anyone else has anything that they'd want to add to that, or if everyone's saying we are at the end of a long night and it's time to wrap up. So anyone have anything they'd want to add to that? It was that perfect of an answer. All right. I thank you all for being here. Really, this is just such an exciting time, and we're looking forward to continuing this journey with you and your students. Please reach out at any point in time, and take care. Have a good night, and we'll see you soon. One last pitch. A week from today, next Thursday morning, anyone who was not able to attend, we will be having a junior parent coffee. It will be an in-person event, which we are so looking forward to. We had that with the 10th grade families this morning, a lot of energy in the room. So if you have any follow-up questions, or you have any friends who were unable to join us tonight, please, next Thursday morning, feel free to join us in the Goldrick House Commons at 9 o'clock. Thank you and have a good night.